And now, for the first time in years, I'm reminded of a Skillet song. Before I end this review of chapter 334 of My Hero Academia, please do me a favor, leave your own thoughts on the chapter in the comment section down below, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure the little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Now, let's get into it. What's up guys, I got Punch here, and here we are to review chapter 334 of My Hero Academia by Kohei Horikoshi, which is known as Parting Gift, which I like to call Deadline Changing, because it's essentially what happened in this chapter. But where does my English go, especially at the beginning of these reviews? Let's hop right into it. So we open up the chapter and we get to see that Shigaraki / All for One / All for Shigaraki / whatever you want to call him, Shiggy, he's on the move. He's dashing, doing the good dash, the mid-air dash too. And apparently, like, Shigaraki, despite his body being destroyed, he isn't going after the pilots directly, and I wonder why. Like, I thought he was going to give it to one of the pilots, but maybe he assumes it's like too dangerous and they wouldn't be afraid to shoot each other down if he gets shot. Right now, he's still in such a weak state that he'll die too. So I'm wondering, like, it seems like a kind of strange thing that he didn't just instantly turn around and be like, okay, one of you break right through the glass and then grab them by the forehead and just quirk them up. But, you know, it'd be like that, wouldn't be like that sometimes. Shigaraki had to dip. Obviously, he probably didn't want to get tanked. He probably didn't want to tank any more lasers today. That was a little bit too much for one. But then, apparently, he, like, in the moment that he exploded the Nomu, like, he blew it up, but he stole the wing quirk back. So now he has wings. So that does just imply, like, were there just two flying quirks or two quirks that simulated flying? Like, out of the hundreds of years that All for One was alive, there was only two flying quirks, two wing quirks, or two things that would have allowed something like flight. I mean, I guess. I mean, flight is such a rare ability. Like, I mean, how many flight quirks have we really seen in the series up to this point? We have so many things that you can, like, mimic flight with, like detonation, one for all. You have all the stuff like that. But the only real one we've seen is, like, Endeavor can use jet propulsion, and Hawks. That's about it. Off the top of the dome are of, like, two genuine flyers, and even then, Endeavor admits it's hard to do. I know we saw Todoroki do it a little bit, and, like, I feel like it's a little bit unlikely. And to be fair, Hood could fly, but maybe Hood had a copy of the wing quirk. No, he had, like, jet propulsion quirks. I wonder, like, some of the things that I sit back and wonder, like, All for One, why don't you have more copies of these things? Like, if you can make copies of quirks, ooh, that's actually, see, I'll admit, I was salty as an ocean after the last review, after the last chapter. That's why you heard me give it a 6 out of 10. I give the chapter like a solid 7 out of 10 now. I'm still not going to give it like 8 or 9 or a 10. But still, I will admit 6 out of 10 was a little bit too low because I was salty because she's gone way too soon in my mind. But, you know, Horikoshi, he writes his own purpose. I get the narrative. I'll go into that in a little bit. But thinking back to the whole quirk thing, does that mean every single copied quirk, is there like a copied person inside there? Like, are they trapped in their own little, like, vestige realm inside the quirk juice bottles? Is that a thing? What happens to the Nomu? Do the Nomu have to fight multiple variation or, like, fight to suppress them? Are they naturally questions for quirks for later, I guess. But regardless, back to the point. Apparently, Shigaraki / All for One is so concerned about, like, getting this quirk away from him that it's mainly because she's literally destroying him from the inside. Like, I get, like, quirks have been always tied to, like, personality and stuff like that. So, and I guess the main reason All for One really is even in the body is because of the fact that his quirk is implanted in there, his true quirk, and he, as a byproduct, like, his consciousness came with the true quirk. So if she manages to destroy All for One, the quirk, it destroys his hold over Shigaraki, but would it also destroy Shigaraki because they're sort of merged right now, or would that not do anything? Would he just become brain dead and just plop on the floor if she managed to destroy him? I don't really know. I'm wondering, like, quirk interacting with biology, quirks are weird. Let's just put it that way. But I still do. I love how, like, All Might recontextualized in the eyes of Shigaraki / All for One is just this terror who's everywhere no matter. He's kind of like in Shigaraki's mind, Shigaraki / All for One's mind, All Might is like this wandering specter that'll just never leave. And I think it's just hilarious, but also really, really good for the character because it shows that at the end of all things, there's one thing that All for One genuinely does hate. And it compiles with Shigaraki's hate. And it's the fact that you just can't escape All Might. And All Might that's pretty darn good on his part. Like he's become such a pervasive aspect of the world that you can't really have anywhere else in the world not be affected by him. That's really cool for a character to have that much of lasting impact, especially after they haven't been active for literally like half the series at this point. But then we get to see that Shigaraki, he does manage to like burst away, and I'm not exactly sure how he does that. Was that like, it was probably one of his burst quirks. Like, I'm not gonna lie, he has that radio wave quirk, right? So he probably did that because they doesn't look like they're in that special defense mode against it. So he may have done that, but he also bursts away from them. I guess maybe he punched at the same time he did it. Maybe it was a quirk explosion energy thing, because he manages to blow them all back and blow them off course. And then we get to, after he escapes, we get to focus in on one of the pilots, one of the brothers of Star and Stripe. And he's all about how Star has already surpassed All Might. Like, she was the greatest hero ever, and it's really sad to see. Like, I'm not gonna lie, pushing all my salt aside, as a person, obviously Star and Stripe was about that action. We only got to see her for one fight. We only knew her for about, I think we really only knew of her existence for like 6 chapters, 7. I think 7 at this point, because I think we had like 4 chapters of her fighting Shigaraki, the prelude to her fighting Shigaraki, this chapter right here, and then chapter before that when she was like hyped up to be introduced. So there's that. We didn't know her for that long, but as a character, she seemed pretty cool. She seemed like she had a lot of potential, but it's this thing. Horikoshi had a narrative purpose for Star, and her narrative purpose, as we see later on in the chapter, is to stall. And I hope the stalling goes somewhere. But then we get to see that we're on the casual coastline of one of the cities, and we cut to these two people who are just living in an apartment, and apparently everything else is cut off, but the power and water is still running. So they're doing pretty good. But then we find out that these two are just criminals. I'm not sure what their relation is, because by the time we get any remote information on, we only get information on the dude, Kashi Kashiko, imprisoned for robbery and the unaliving of people. So he's not the nicest of dudes, and I'm assuming that looks like his sister. Like, they have similar hair, but who knows? They may not be related at all, but close enough. They're ready to live their new life as just, casual people, just living good, eating good, surviving while they can. Even if they don't have any TV or anything like that, they'll do their best. And the interesting thing is water, and I mean, who's running those facilities though, that the water and power is still going? Like, are there actually people still like clocking into work every day? Maybe that's a fully automatic system in this world. We don't really know much about the infrastructure of the My Hero Academia world, and we know it's more technically advanced because they have like holograms and stuff like that. So it's possible that everything is like self-automated in this world. And I love this shot of Shigaraki, like almost instinctively after he bursts into the building. I love the idea of Shigaraki like hiding in his wings, like he's breathing heavy, still struggling to regenerate, and he's holding his arm almost on that Vegeta type beat, but he has his wings like covering himself, like he's almost in like a standing fetal position with the wings. Like, usually whenever a character is confident and they have wings, their wings are furled out wide, like stretched out, flapping in the air. But like, he's literally hovering and cowering behind his wings because he's in such shock on what he went through. And I love how well, this murderer and robber is like, oh no, a monster, like you aren't. But regardless of that, we see that All For One, despite all the odds, is still like focused on, I gotta get this quirk. Because to be fair, New Order would be, couldn't he turn it off? Would he have to touch him? Couldn't he turn it off? New Order will rebel against other quirks. Couldn't, if he was about to use New Order, is New Order like protected under this like weird quirk clause? Because if he had touched himself, well, that sounds so bad. I rephrase that. If he had activated New Order upon himself again, like we saw he was about to do something to the atmosphere, so could he have been like, New Order will no longer rebel against other quirks? I'm assuming not. All For One is smart enough to have thought of that, so I'm assuming that's not how that works. But man, like, if he would have tried it and failed, that would have been cool to see. Like, And she would explain something along the lines of, "Oh, by the way, like the quirk itself is altered on a fundamental property. You just ain't doing that." Like in my mind, he literally could have just been like, "New Order will not rebel against other quirks. New Order will work well with other quirks." Like, but I don't know. There's a reason it wasn't done. We'll just rock with that. There's a reason he couldn't do it. Bada bing, bada boom. But I love how All for One is still on this path of like, okay, reasonably, she said the rule is that it can't coexist with other quirks. Thusly, why didn't you just make 2 new rules? I mean, he probably just doesn't have control over the quirk. Let me just assume that. He probably just doesn't have access to it, because he easily could have popped out 2 other rules and would have been fine. But regardless of that, he's essentially assuming, wait a minute, if it only is it won't coexist with other quirks, I can just like use somebody as a storage vessel. I'll just take their quirk and then once their quirk, let's drop New Order into them and like, I don't know, paralyze their spine, make a brain dead so they don't know how to activate the quirk. And I feel like that could work out in his mind. But the thing is, he's like Star and Stripe calls him a fool, and that it's weird. Star and Stripe calls him a fool, and it seems that due to the rule that she placed, which is New Order will revolt against other quirks, she's mostly like the vestige of her is mostly destroyed by fighting all of them, to the point where she's mostly reduced to like a skeleton of her former self. And it seems like she wasn't able to actually get to All for One directly, but I guess most of the quirks did the damage. Like, I'm not sure if All for One transferring over the quirk meant anything to anybody, or if like the quirks I'm assuming the quirks inside All for One are what actually got rid of her, considering she's reduced to a skeleton and she's unable to attack him anymore. But at the same time, All for One says, "Now get out, you corpse," which implies that he kicked her out. But either way works. Like, he lives, essentially. That's the end game thing here. And I like how her message to All for One, like her final word, her final will is like, "Yo, I want you to know this, you idiot. As long as people are still willing to help each other, the will of a hero shall be passed on, and they will surely put an end to you." And this is essentially the same message that every previous One for All user tried to instill into All for One, and that's why All for One is trying to end that bloodline as quickly as possible. So it's pretty darn cool, I'm not gonna lie. I'm glad that she leaves that message with him, because you can tell, even though we don't see his eyes, you don't see much of his face, that sneer he has, it's like spiteful, because he knows it's true. And I think that's great that Horikoshi managed to portray that through just one drawing. Like, he doesn't say anything like that. He's like, he still tries to argue back, like, as long as a human survives, it's our victory. But he's still like so spiteful as he wants him out of her body, and she's gone. But then we see something that scares me. I'm not gonna lie. We see the words "a hero," and then we see the child that Midoriya noticed all that time ago, and it is Shigaraki. Now, notably, I'm still on the don't save Shigaraki train. I hate to admit it. Like, I love Shigaraki as a character. He's one of my favorites in the entire series. If he gets saved or redeemed or whatever, even if he just goes to jail, like, don't. I don't know. I want him gone. This is like, unfortunately, I feel like the only way Shigaraki's story can end in a satisfied way to me is death. Like, Horikoshi, if you're willing to kill off all these super interesting characters or kill off or waste interesting characters like Mirio, Naide. I was gonna say Gran Torino, but he keeps keeping Gran Torino alive for some reason. Mirio, Night-Eye, Mirako, Nagant, Star and Stripe, like all these different characters. If you're willing to just pop them in, Tamaki, like so many different cool characters. If you're willing to introduce these people, Rappa, Fat Go, like if you were willing to introduce so many of these interesting characters and just off them like that, please off Shigaraki. He just needs to go. Like, the reason I say this worries me is because the words that resonate with this young Shigaraki, which is being covered by all these hands, which is a very cool image. Like, obviously Shigaraki in hands is a big thing, because of course his past and stuff like that. But the reason this concerns me is because this is the thing that Midoriya needs to reach, and it seems like this child Shigaraki, beneath all of this like chaotic hand motion, is specifically reaching out to Izuku Midoriya, which is the hero in reference. So if he just ends up beating through all the evil and brings out Kid Shigaraki, wouldn't be surprising. I know some people would be happy with that. I wouldn't. I think after all this time, I kind of just need Shigaraki to get up on out of here. But who knows? I can't obviously can't predict anything because I thought Star and Stripe. I thought she would make it a little bit more. I thought she would at least meet the hero. I'd be fine with her dying later, but no, she's dead already. But she did her job because, as we see, the search party that was sent to find Shigaraki couldn't find him. Like he had dipped way too quickly, and they couldn't pursue him after that. And apparently, obviously, news of America's #1 hero's death just spread like wildfire, and as it should. She was reasonably the strongest hero left outside, or at least from what we knew, she was the strongest hero left in the entire world since All Might was gone, and now she was off by All for One. And now all the other nations are like, whoa, wait a minute. She died? Wow. That's crazy, Japan. You know what? You know that help we were planning on sending you? Gonna have to revoke that real quick. And everyone, like, one of the heroes we see, Salam, was he wanted to still go, but none of them were like that because they're obviously just like, yeah, let's just not. If he manages to kill the strongest hero, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to risk our own integrity for Japan. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that problem when it gets to it. And like I mentioned a few chapter reviews back, All for One did play a smart game here. If he wins Japan, he wins the world because he already has his allies overseas. And obviously, if he was able to beat the strongest hero while not even complete, once he's complete, the rest of the world's getting pooped on. I hate to say that's it. It's a free GG for the rest of the world. But the interesting thing is we see the brother of Star, who is older than he was in that previous flashback by a decent margin. He's a pretty old dude, but I think that's pretty cool. And we see that the sacrifice that she made was not in vain. And All Might even notes that he wanted to see Cassie again, which is that's nice. That's really, really cool. But we see that the planes that they have recorded the battle, and that the planes are so advanced that they were able to get all the information on his biological processes, and they even have an analysis of his quirk. Now, what do they mean by his quirk? Do they mean All for One, or do they mean like all the quirks he displayed in that battle? I don't know. They specifically say his quirk, so it may be All for One. They may like be able to create a countermeasure or a counter strategy to All for One in particular, so they don't have to worry about him like stealing quirks. Maybe able to come with like an anti All for One drug or something like that. Or at the same time, they could do something, because apparently the main goal of this is to use all that data to study the freak's body, and that could hypothetically lead to like them finding certain weak points, them finding ways where his body isn't fully integralized and structured properly, all that good stuff. But then we get to see that 2 days after Midori returned to UA, that the deadline has been pushed back for the final fight against All for One. They actually have a week because Shigaraki isn't going to be able to make his move because of Stars and Stripes. That sacrifice that she made delayed Shigaraki enough that he's not confident in coming out and fighting because his body was weakened so much. And thusly, they need to use this time wisely to optimize their power and optimize their abilities so they can defeat All for One and Shigaraki. And that is the end of the chapter with the main trio. What do we call the My Hero Academia trio? Like the Bakugo, Midoriya, and Todoroki trio. What is that called? Like, I know One Piece has the Monster trio, the JJK trio. I know. Actually, no, I think about 7 Nations actually have a trio. Like, that's just the whole gang. But like, what do we call the trio here? I'm not sure. But essentially, this trio, they're the main focus at the end of this chapter. Even though everyone's there, obviously they have to be though. There are like main characters. There's the main character, the main rival, and then the side plot essentially. So, how do I think about this chapter? It was pretty darn good. It has nothing that's like entirely insane about it. That's like, boom, 12 out of 10. But it's a solid 8. I'll live with that because it reestablishes a lot of information while giving like a final proper send off to Star and Stripe, and I think it's pretty good. It gives us a deadline extension for the whole final battle, so we're probably gonna get either 1 or 2 chapters, or who knows, maybe even like a month's chapters worth of like training up. I'm assuming the main goal in this week is to get Midoriya up to 100%, like have him have 100% and then be able to stack Fajian on top of it, so he doesn't have to use like a fake 100%, getting everyone to maximize their quirks to their ultimate efficiency, stuff like that, studying and training against All For One's body with Shigaraki, like, you know, getting every single preparation they can ready for this big final bout. And I think that's going to be cool. I'm actually excited to see what they're going to do with this time. If anything, we may just leap right into the battle anyway. I don't know with Horikoshi. I'll admit, I'm done trying to predict the man. So, yeah, I think that was a pretty solid chapter. Do I think that... Let me see, there was something I wanted to cover. Yeah, Star's death and like Horikoshi's whole like character utility thing. So I've realized, especially with Star's death now here to a point, when Horikoshi writes a character, he has the end game for a character in mind. I think there's only one exception, and that's where I think he ruined it. That's why I don't think it's good. I believe that whenever Horikoshi has a character, he has their end game pretty much pre-planned out, and no matter what else could have happened with that character that could have been interesting or cool or good and stuff like that, or at least in my mind, I'm not going to lie, my ideas of interesting, cool, and good are constant character interaction. I know that's not a lot of people's thing. So the thing is, I feel like Horikoshi, he'll write a character with their endgame in mind no matter what, and then he will not shift from that point. Like Night Eye's point at the end of the day in the overall arc was to die. Why? Make Mirio feel bad. That's it. I'm not even going to lie. I can't even think of another reason for that. Make Mirio feel bad. That's why Night Eye died. He wanted to write a tragedy with Mirio. He did that. He made Mirio go through it, hyped him up to be a super great hero, took his quirk away at the very end, and killed his master. There you go. Super sad story. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to write a tragedy with Mirio. Maruko, he wanted to give her one cool fighting scene. He wanted to make it, he wanted essentially an advancer to the plot. He put Maruko in there, had her have a cool fight, had her taken out of the story. She got disabled. She could come back, true. All that good stuff, great. But that's the thing. When Horikoshi writes a character, he writes it with their endgame in mind, and bada bing, bada boom. No matter what else could happen, he's pretty much tunnel visioned on that. Like, Stars and Stripes' narrative purpose was never to be a long-lasting character that had potential to interact with the other characters. It was always just to be something to stall Shigaraki, because Shigaraki was made too strong. Because in my mind, the reason I don't like it is because why make your villain that strong that they need to have just an entire character dedicated to weakening them? Like, that was her point in the narrative. If like you could have thrown a quirk virus in there that like limited the amount of quirks All For One could have had, and he would have been weakened that way just fine too. You didn't need to have Star and Stripe. You didn't need to make a whole character for it. But he made Star and Stripe with the intention to weaken Shigaraki because he made Shigaraki too strong. And that's fine. I'll admit, I judge things harshly. I will just give you know, my opinion. Don't ever let my opinion dissuade yours. I'm just here to tell you mine. But in my mind, I don't like when Horikoshi does that. And at the same time, maybe some things should have just stayed the way they are. Like when he tried to rewrite Mirio's tragedy by giving him his quirk back randomly in the middle of the war arc, he couldn't do anything with Mirio. Because I'm assuming he brought Mirio back purely by fan request. Like Mirio was such a great character and he left him alive, so he's like, oh, I might as well bring him back. But he got 2 seconds of fame, got a whole ton of screams on the internet, and then that was it. Because Mirio can't do much. It's not his story anymore. Like once Horikoshi writes you out of a narrative, one way or another, whether it be by taking away your quirk, taking away your legs, killing you, whatever it is, Horikoshi's done with you as a character, and I think that's pretty darn evident. So I'm not as salty at Stars and Stripes' death, considering I just got it. Like, it's one of the things. Like, you don't hear me complain about Horikoshi's pacing as much anymore, mainly because I've just accepted it. That's just a Horikoshi thing. Like, in the way he writes characters just to kill them, that's a Horikoshi thing. I can't get mad at that. That's just how he writes, and I gotta accustom my review style and like my views on how I critique him to that. Every author has their own little thing. Every viewer has their own little thing. So I'm gonna let that slide. This chapter, though, this week, solid 8 out of 10. Happy Star and Stripe got a proper send off. Happy that her sacrifice isn't going to be in vain. I'm excited to see what we're going to be doing next week in terms of like training, getting ourselves ready, all the stuff like that. It is entirely possible that we could be cutting over to like the other League of Villains members because we don't know where Toga is. We don't know what Dabi's up to. That could be cool. We know we still have this whole side plot with the whole Dabi thing going on right now. That could be interesting. We're obviously building up to the big final battle. All that super duper cool. But those are my thoughts. Please tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is that guy with the pencil. We're writing off.